To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Well, good morning, gardeners and homesteaders. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. And you know, we're not going to let you go into your summer planting season without doing Batavia's least favorite topic, summer pests. Yeah, it's painful, don't you think?
Yeah, we speak about summer pests either annually, like when it's one of our annual episodes, or for sure every other year. And I feel like we could speak about it for another 20 years and we'd never cover off on all of them.
Yeah.
You know, every time, once the episode's released, and then once we get really thick into summer, I start seeing people post pests and I'm just like, phew, dodge that bullet. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's funny though? You know, my YouTube channel, Sandy Bottom Homestead, come check it out. I do videos about, well, lately it's been a lot about planting earlier and people love them. And then I start talking about disease and pest and not nobody, but it's just not as a hot topic until you get the pest, and then you're frantically looking for it. And I don't think that's a healthy way to go into the season. I think my school of thought, and you can tell us yours when I'm finished.
Okay.
That came out way worse than it was meant to. I think that we should be prepared beforehand so you know what to look for and have ideas in your head, because it's going to happen. You're going to get a pest. I mean, plain and simple, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I've already seen the first roly-polies of the season, which some people may not even describe as a pest. You know, and this is, you know, we're recording, this comes out right at the beginning of May, we're recording April. So already, right? You know?
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance though, because there's to my point, an infinite number of pests. So this is where a lot of the approaches you take to identify and manage and be proactive, they pretty much cross various pests. So the information that we talk about today should be relevant to all, but they're definitely localized pests, right?
Yeah.
And so this ties to it doesn't mean you need to go around every farm in your city, and every garden in your city to interview people. But this is where understanding what happens in your area becomes important. And sometimes, again, I'm going to beat this drum. That's not the drum, though. That's not.
That's the desk. Works. Beat the desk.
Yeah. I'm going to keep on dripping, with this message. This is where you're cataloging things either actively in your brain through pictures, through photos, through actual notes, right? One of my flying pests. I need to know, when do I start seeing it every year?
Yeah.
And when do I stop seeing it? And it feels like sometimes never, but
it's tough, and it's something that we need to be prepared for. And it's a lot easier to have a plan and be prepared for it, and then you see it and then you can just nip it right away, instead of, a lot of people, like myself, you have to order stuff off of Amazon. So you get 3, 4, 5 days shipping. I know a lot of people are like, I get same day shipping. It must be really nice to get what Prime advertises, but that's a different story. But by the time it gets here and I get to go out there, I mean, you could have multiple generations of this pest have reproduced in your garden, and it's tough. And as we go into this, there is a section in the Amazon link below that will give you all of the treatments that we use, and you will help support the show at no extra cost to you. It's an affiliate link. But check that out, because if you need something, they're organic treatments. I don't think we have any inorganic treatments on there. And that's simply just because neither one of them use inorganic treatments. But they're on there and you can use those. And that, I don't have a lot of quote unquote chemicals to keep, I have just a few things that I use, but knowing when to use them and how often to use them is really helpful. And there's all kinds of techniques you can use, because I let my pests get out of control last year and I suffered greatly from it. And I'm probably going to suffer from it this year. We're going to see, and I'll get into that. But it's going to be an uphill battle for me because of my mismanagement of it last year. And I don't want that to be somebody else's story. And on that note, if you do have, like I had, and you have some kind of issue and you have a crop die and you need to replant it, you can check out the seed store below. That's the seeds that we are selling that are all direct sowable, and they'll work good for you. I need a cough button. I was about to cough right at the end of that. The pollen is brutal, man. So that being said, what is the status for pests in your garden as of right now?
Well, I'm going to take a beat. You should have seen me leaning in as you were coughing. Safe word? You're good?
Yeah, I'm okay. Good. Safe word.
Before we get into that, and you'll have to ask me again because I talked myself out of remembering what the question was. So for my, my day job, my 9-to-5 job, we work with projects and we implement, new solutions, and there's a change management element of it. All right, we're going to change something that may have a negative impact or, resolve some fix, all of that stuff. Right. And a part of what, for eons I've tried to do is let's talk through what the solution, what the protocol is going to be when something breaks bad. Right. Let's do this with clear eyes, because once you get into the heat of it, you don't always make the best decisions. Right. So at the top of the call, you mentioned, well, you really believe that people should, in advance of it happening, kind of have an understanding and potentially even a plan. And it really ties to that, with my 9-to-5 gig. Right. So you end up making knee-jerk reactions when you go out and you see what you believe is the beginning of an infestation or a potential infestation, right? So a lot of people take to the internet, start posting things, and the amount of people that will reply with, some level of authority in their response, that you get, a second reply down and you realize they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, that's what people say. You know what I'm saying? So, you have sometimes folks are chasing their tails as gardeners. And so, again, going back to, hey, pests are going to happen. Do a little bit of digging of the type of pests that you see in your garden or that people in your area see, and a couple of loose plans, let's say, So back to the question.
What kind of pests are you seeing in your garden?
Raccoons aside, we're not talking about that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, if you want to talk, look, that is a hot topic. I
prefer not to.
Okay, because that is, so I know for you don't want to talk about it, but I know there's a lot of our listeners that are really having problems with mammals, and that's a whole show in itself. That's a separate show, and that's not really what I don't think we should talk about that today. I think that's something we should visit in its own thing, because it gets very convoluted, and going from spraying something to eliminating some kind of four-legged animal is just two totally different things. So stick to pests. Because
there was a minute there when you said, I know you don't want to talk about it, where I felt like you were highlighting the selfishness that I was displaying. So despite the need of the listener to hear this kind of stuff, just because I don't want to talk about, So I'm glad that you rounded that out to say that this.
When I cover for you, you're not supposed to expose it. Come on now.
I'm denouncing the selfishness, right? So a short list, and it's a pretty short list, all things considered. My number one pest, and it's tied to what I grow. So the cabbage moth always flies in my garden. The more I garden, the more I see them. And so that turns into, generally speaking, there are a couple of different names for it, but the cabbage worm, which primarily attacks my brassicas. So my collards, my kale, cabbage, little damage on broccoli. I just don't know if that's because it gets out of my garden so quickly. And I typically start seeing it in April. and through the frost. So other pests, roly-polies, which are notorious for eating seedlings. I have aphids starting as early as in my grow room, but absolutely outside. White flies towards the end of summer. Japanese beetle midsummer.
No, I was talking about right now. What are you dealing with?
Well, we got to keep on going down this road.
Yeah,
I'm here
keep
now.
going now. You done steered it. I mean, you got the ship going in the other direction. That's all right.
Veer right. June bugs. So that's the kind of list of the pests I can think of in the moment. Right now, the only thing I'm experiencing issues with are the aphids and the roly-polies.
So I have not had any real pests this year, believe it or not. I can't believe it. I just had 100% harvest on my broccoli. So 0
Congratulations.
broccoli bolted. That is the first time in 17 years that's happened.
Congratulations.
So yeah, that's a big deal. That went I didn't even have to treat them. So I think a lot of that had to do with being healthy plants, but whatever it is, I don't know, El Nino, whatever, it's making it better. It made it better. I don't know, but I haven't had that. But my potatoes, as of right now, and I'm sitting here as we've been talking the whole time, I don't know what the pest is. It looks to be an assassin bug is what's on it. Yeah, and you've seen assassin bugs. You may not realize it. I don't know the exact term for it, what it is. A wheel bug is, but whatever it is, here's your first tip. I'm going to start you off early. I went out there and I was recording a video and I didn't like the way it came. A lot of times when you're doing something, I'll stop. I don't really do it a lot, but sometimes I'll just delete it and start over. Well, during my first of 3 takes of the video, I came across and I saw my potato, and there was about 8 of them on one leaf. And so I plucked that leaf off completely and just smashed all of them. And I kind of made a distasteful joke in the new video when I was explaining it, and I'll say it here just because it is what it is, but it was basically like, I guess wheel bug genocide real quick. Like I just took out the whole kit and caboodle of them. So, that was my first form of defense for that. And I noticed them on there and I didn't think anything when I saw one, but then I saw them all on that one. Then right below it was some leaves that were wilted and dead. So I don't know if they are a pest, but the evidence is there. So the next step is going to be starting to treat for them after this rain passes. So that's really the only thing I've dealt with for now. But as we get into summer, I know for a fact that it's going to come in, and I'll give you proof of this later, but these attacks can introduce the scarier part into your garden. That's disease. And so that's something
to really... Pests and disease are uniquely different. In both cases, you could end up with a weaker plant, and it's kind of circular when it comes to pests can weaken a plant and make it more difficult for them to fight off disease, which is me taking the words out of your mouth. I could see it in your face.
No, my eye was itching. I'm serious. The other thing, though, is the pests can actually transfer disease as well. So starting off with like a really healthy plant will help it to fight that disease. But it's like they go hand in hand. Like the pest can cause the disease, and the disease could cause the pest because it weakens it to a point to where the pests want to get on and, have their fun, play some Barry White, turn the lights down low, and just reproduce like it ain't nobody's business. And I did have I had a pretty severe aphid outbreak in the greenhouse, so I am dealing with that right now. And it's funny, I showed it on YouTube and I was like, I come back and treat it. Well, I didn't treat it. And then I was like, I come back and treat it. I didn't treat it. Finally, I was like, I got to come back and I got to treat it. So I've done my initial treatment and it's about due for another treatment. So we'll be doing that soon.
Are you doing soapy water, or are you past that point now?
No. So the first thing I actually did go in there and do what they say start with, which is stupid, but I sprayed water on it to try and knock them off, which I know is not going to work. And I wasn't worried about it until it started spreading. And then now I've done soapy water, and I'm pretty sure all of the aphids that are on the plant are dead. But I'm going to come back and do another soapy water treatment. And that really does work very well. The idea behind it, and for a lot of pests, I went ahead and sprayed my whole garden with it. Actually, it desiccates the bug, just like when you wash your hands with dish soap, makes them real dry. Same thing, but they can't handle it, so they die. So that does work really well.
The spraying it on with just water, which I've done, and it normally by the time we get later in the season, they are, marching in droves. So every spray, they're so weak. These soft-bodied creatures are so weak, you knock them off of the plant, right? They're not going to make it back up the way of the plant is the idea of it. But once you get to the point where they're clustering on plants, sometimes it's hard to catch them all, even with that soapy spray. Even with that, kind of spray of the hose or whatever have you. Fortunately for me, by the time we get that bad with aphids in the garden, that plant itself is probably reached the end of its rope. End of its rope? That's the saying, right? Yeah. So I could make decisions around that. I don't normally have outside aphid issues early in the season. It's interesting, though, that you brought up, the weakness of the plant. I've mentioned to you before that for the last 3 years, I think I've gotten aphids indoors. They start with my peppers, right? And so I basically rinse those plants off multiple times a week. And I can watch some of them drop down into the soil in that cell pack that they're in. And I was thinking about it like, it's really not off to a good start, right? A plant is trying to defend itself day by day. But then I also kind of balanced. I generally, for peppers, have a really, really successful set of pepper plants. So whether I know that they can definitely take over plants. And that's the reason why I'm trying to manage it, a few times a week. But I'm also kind of making a footnote where sometimes things just run their course. Right. So it sounds good that, it's never really taken itself outside and held and I can get past it. But I am keeping in mind that I really need to work on year to year how to manage that against that earlier on. Right. So, at this recording, I'm almost a month away from planting them out. And that's a lot of effort to wait for, to plant and manage. Like, you're managing pests for a month, an additional month, right? So.
Yeah, I just thought of something too, which is not really related, but it's interesting. Don't roll your eyes. Bees actually eat aphids, and it creates a honeydew honey. So it's pretty interesting. So maybe I'm like, well, let me get some aphid crops going on here and see if I can't get them going. But, that's something that just interested me. But the washing them off, you said you have to do it multiple times for your peppers.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's in my utility sink by my washer and dryer. So, to be quite frank, if I had those plants in an upstairs, if I had to go to my kitchen sink to do it, I'd toss the whole thing. Sometimes I've actually, when I've potted things, I've gave everything a good rinse, raked all of the dirt, the soil that's kind of where the plant is potted, to put fresh soil in, because we're going to talk more about the life cycle of these things, the eggs that, have been laid and so on. I remember now that's one of the reasons that I started my peppers later last year, was to try to avoid the beginning of the aphids or shorten the period of time I had to manage against it.
Well, let me ask you this. If the aphids can't crawl up the plant, how do they get up to the plant?
Well, think about the height of a plant outside and think about the height of a start.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but my mustard that's bolting got the aphids, it's 6 feet tall. How did the aphids get all the way to the top? What I'm trying to understand is when we talk about spraying water on them, where does that make sense? Because the aphids got to come from somewhere,
Well, the ones you're knocking off are the injured soldiers. So they're not making their way back up is the theory. But they're, in my mind, it's you never got them all to begin with.
Right.
You know?
And then they're going down in the soil and they're laying eggs.
Yeah.
And then they're just rehatching. So it's like it's an uphill battle is what I'm trying to say. It's a stupid question, really, because it's like, which came first, chicken or the egg? It's like, I don't know. Pick one. You know
and
I
I've
mean?
even, again, going back to it, I don't want to spend too much more time here because we're mostly talking about summer pests and primarily outdoors. But I've done the whole, pour boiling water on your soil medium when you're starting indoors. And I feel like maybe my water, the boil I'm reaching is just not hot enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, aphids, they do go away, but it is something that you're going to get in May. I usually get them. There's certain crops that get them. But then as you go through this, you start getting into summer, you start getting more and more pests. Japanese beetles are a big one.
Yeah.
And this is one that I really wanted to talk about because last year, for the first year, I got a mosaic virus on my green beans, and I am 99% convinced, because I had a bad outbreak last year. I had a really hard time getting them under control. And I read that the Japanese beetle can transfer the mosaic virus to the plant. Now, the plant was really healthy, but by the time the Japanese beetles had finished chewing on the plant, it was no longer healthy, so it couldn't fight it off. So that leaves me this year with a trellis that I can't put for a couple of years green beans on. And the cucumber, so my thing was like, well, I'll put the cucumbers on there. Well, the cucumbers can get the cucumber mosaic virus. Okay. So I don't know if we're going to see if it's going to be an issue. Essentially, I'm like, I just got to see what's going to happen, but I'm kicking myself because last year as I was walking around, I was like, I'll just pick a couple off, this, that, and the other. I should have been treating for them, and I should have been treating for them early because every year it's like you see one, you're going to see 100 before long. And I mean, they were having like orgies on there. There was like 3 deep on top of each other, and I was grabbing them all. I could not get on. And the other problem was they were so high up. At one point, you can go back in the old videos last year and see I had a ladder out there next to it. I just left so I could climb up and pick them off. So, the good thing about this is there's multiple ways to attack, especially Japanese beetles, but any pest. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's me raising my hand. So when you get to a natural stopping point, I want to comment on what you just commented on before you change gears. So Japanese beetles, and it's I have issues with those as well. And I am giving the advice of track when they start and when they don't. And I have to go back and look at my pictures. I normally take the picture of the first time I see it, but I kind of don't track when I stop seeing it. And there probably is some information for Illinois, on the interweb. But anywho, every year that I've had real clusters of Japanese beetles, it's been different. Yeah. Right. So some years I've used the trap. Remember the one you suggested a few years back? And I'm going to buy multiples of a thing, right? If there's something I think I'm going to use, I have 4 of them in my garage. So I had traps going into last year, and I didn't put them out because they're pretty disgusting too. They're not as bad as what I see online about like mosquito traps. Have you ever seen those? Yeah. Yeah. They're not that bad, but they're pretty bad all the same. So last year I didn't use it. I handpicked my Japanese beetles, which typically attack okra for me, hibiscus, part of the same family. There are a couple other flowers like my canna lilies they'll attack. They don't normally attack any real producing beans. Let me take that back. So beans and okra are the food that they attack. And I don't know the logic between why last year was a light year in comparison, to perhaps 2 years prior where it was like everywhere, like you're picking out your door, to see where they are. Yeah. It's kind of still ties back to maybe I'll be team it, being prepared in advance because you don't even know how bad it's going to be for you in a season.
Well, and that's the thing too. So it's like I only used the trap 1 year. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going to end up doing it again this year just because it was so bad. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the trap, and then I'll come back and handpicking Japanese beetles. It's not gross. It's just weird. I don't like the way they feel on my skin. They get all crawly and stuff.
They're kind of happy too.
Yeah, they are. But if you can get them, and I mean, just dropping them in water, killing them, you can really and truly make a dent with it. But I think it needs to be coupled with some other methods. And I do use neem oil for it once I get my head around like, hey, Ben, you got 500 Japanese beetles. It's time to do something about it. When I should be like, hey, you've got 10. Let's nip it in the bud now. And I think the way it works is, the eggs come out, they hatch, and then they do it for a small period of time, but it gets really hot and heavy. So it's like, I'll use neem oil for it. That seems to work really well, coupled with doing the hand picking. And if you do the traps too, I mean, the thing is you do all that you can do to make it work. You know what I mean? And I don't like to just treat the whole garden for no reason. Somebody the other day on a video of mine had commented that they're spraying neem oil as a pre-treatment and they're doing it every 7 days. And I don't like that because there's no reason, if you don't have anything there's no reason to do it. And what it can end up doing, it's a lot like taking too many antibiotics, and you start to build a resistance. I believe, and we've seen it in other pests, that they will build a resistance to a treatment. So we don't want to just treat for no reason.
Excellent point.
And it's documented that the varroa mite, and again, for the honeybees, though, they built a resistance to treatment, and that's why they're out of control. So it's the same thing for us. It's like, I don't really want to treat, and I also don't want to just treat my green beans. Like, I don't want to mix up everything and then just like, okay, I'm going to spray, because you can't really leave it mixed up for a long time. So I don't really want to just go spray the green beans and call it a day. So a lot of times what I do is I wait until there's multiple things, multiple signs to show. You know what I mean? Like my potatoes, for instance, right now, like I'm going to have to spray them with neem oil. Luckily, I've got 2 beds of potatoes, so I can spray them, and I can do that. And I also will spray my carrots because I don't know white flies there or not. It's hard for me to tell. So I will proactively treat those, but I try not, I'm just trying to I'm trying to be cheap and save my money, but also save my efforts to an extent.
But when you're talking about that pre-treating, it's if they start as you've treated, if, eggs have been hatched, you're attacking them before you see it. Right. So just a quick note. And this, again, it's the quick Google searches are super helpful. The Chicago Botanic Garden reports that for, obviously, Illinois, adult beetles emerge in early July and feed for 4 to 6 weeks on more than 300 species of plants. Female beetles, this is the Japanese beetle I'm speaking of, lay eggs in soil 3 inches below the surface on the lawn, which means the same thing probably with your garden. Grubs hatch 2 weeks later and feed on grass roots for about 8 weeks until they are full grown. That's a long period of time, right? Yeah. And some of the things that, so you may start to see them in May and June, where they've hibernated over winter. So for the Japanese beetle, if you don't see them and you see kind of like almost like a cheese grater on your leaves, like you see kind of, it's not a full hole, it's not necessarily just poop. Chances are you see that's the Japanese beetle, especially if for your area it's a time of year that they're normally out. In the morning when I get them, I never don't see them in the morning, right? And so the way I manage it is I have a mason jar with soapy water with a lid, and I carry it around, hand pick them, toss them in the soapy water and the lid. I use that versus a bucket because those little things, they'll start crawling out of it, and so every couple of days once they've reached their demise, I'll toss them out into the alley and fill the water or the mason jar back up with soapy water and just, again, continue to do that. And then, when things get really bad, I'll have the trap. That's my method. And that's probably what I'll do this year. Well,
I got a piece of information for you because I did a quick Google search. When you said I did a quick Google search, and then I had my answer. I've been waiting I've been like itching. So in North Carolina, they become active in late May, early June, and feed all the way up until July. It says here specifically, monitoring can be easily done with bag type Japanese beetle traps. So what that's telling me is it's more for monitoring for them instead of treating them, which is interesting. Now, I did see somebody, they left their trap up in their front yard in my neighborhood, and that thing looked like it had some weight in it. So now, and let me say this as well. The smell of a dead Japanese beetle can attract more Japanese beetles. So like Batavia said, you've got to be proactive and dump them out.
Yeah.
I dump them in water because then I just dump them out and give them to the chickens and they can eat them. So, that's something you can do as well. But it is something that needs to be, stay on top of. And also the University of Minnesota states here that neem oil is effective for several days, but you need to repeat applications. And it is one of the best treatments for them because, the biggest thing too is, like you said, identifying what the damage looks like. And if you're curious, you can go back. I'll try and on my YouTube channel, I'll post in like the channel, there's like a highlight video. I'll try and highlight the video I did where it was like talking about the different damages because I had a lot of pests at the time. But when you see that, you need to at least remember that because in the morning and the evening, they are very mellow and they're, if you go out there at noon, they're active, they're flying around. But in the morning, they have the dew sitting on them and they're not really moving around. They're easy to grab. So, hit them on all fronts.
So real quick, there's some things that you see flying around like my, beloved, not cabbage moth. You could see her flying, right? Japanese beetles, to your point, in the morning, I don't often see them flying. It's just I'm doing a garden walk and I'm looking at plant leaves, right? And so by then you also think about kind of the maturity of some of the things they're drawn to, so by then my plants have some height, which is the reason why young Ben had the ladder out there, and so they're a little bit easier to spot, but that's a part of why I'm doing the walk. I'm looking for a trouble. I'm looking for the beauty, but I'm also looking for trouble.
Let me go on the record and say I hate being on a ladder more than anything. So every time I was up there getting those beetles, I was cussing. Like there was no film on because I was mad as fire. So
remember a couple of years ago, I was trying to shield my sunflower seeds, and while they were still on the stalk, and so I had a letter from my uncle. And I had it in the front yard. So I'm like, I live in the middle of the city in Chicago. So regular residential street. And I have a ladder and I'm on top of it. And I'm chatting with a neighbor a couple of doors down. And he's like, goodness, like, how tall is that ladder? And I'm like, oh, it's about 8 feet. And then he's like, no, that can't be. And it's taller than 8 feet. And then I'm like, oh, it's taller than 8 feet. And so then it's like, now the panic is setting in. Like, how high am I really?
Yeah.
I think it was 10 or 12 feet the ladder was, So I wasn't at the tip top, but I was pretty high up there. And last year, this was like 2 years ago. Last year, I just realized, let the birds and the squirrels have them. The seeds, I'm not trying to cover them. And squirrels are assassins. So whatever I was using to cover, they ate through that crap.
Now,
but all that said, I don't normally mind being on a ladder unless it's taller than what I thought it was.
Yeah, one rung is enough for me. So Leonard's favorite is tomato hornworms. Now, this is, aphids and hornworms are two that I don't understand the issue with them. Typically for me, hornworms are really easy to take care of. They are a pain in the butt, don't get me wrong. But, the thing is with them is first of all, you've got to know how to find them. They are perfect for hiding. And to go on the record, most of the hornworms you see are actually the American tobacco hornworm, just so you know. But we call them tomato hornworms, whatever. They're the big, giant, super nasty green worms,
They're fatty, yeah.
They're fatty. And what they actually are, they're a larva. They're not even a worm. So they turn into a moth and they fly off. But you got to look for the damage. And it's easy. You find poop. You'll start seeing the tippy tops of your leaves on your tomatoes be chewed up.
And
Guarantee you've got them.
If you just see the stem, you got them.
Yeah. If you just see the stem, you got them. The benefit is you follow the trail of poop, you find it. I know a lot of people use the UV lights Do you use those?
I bought one of those, but because I'm afraid of going into the garden at night now,
Yeah.
I don't use it at night anymore. I don't go out there to look for them at night, but they were when I did a few years back when I was, afraid of nothing. You could definitely spot them.
Right.
And now it's one of those bit things like you see the first damage. If you got 1, you probably got 4. You got 4, you probably got 8, right?
Yeah.
So I fortunately have not lost a plant to them. And so it's one of those things like your eye starts, like if you're getting your eyes dilated, it starts to focus in once you see the first one, which again, during the daytime, they're camouflaging,
Yeah.
But once you see the first one, then you start to look around and you better believe in the same vicinity, you're going to see the next. Again, the poop is also.
Yeah. So I don't subscribe to the UV light thing. I just think it's a waste. I think it's a benefit to sit out there and actually look at. I mean, if you had rows and rows and rows, sure. But most people have a handful of tomatoes. I mean, even if you have 20 plants, you still have a handful of tomatoes. You go out there, you see the damage, just stop and look. And you'll start to see patterns. And this is, I think the UV light really, it almost cripples the gardener in taking away the advantage of being able to physically spot this pest and being able to remove it. Now, I will say that you just find the damage, follow it down. It's going to be in that area. They do not move fast, but they eat a lot. Mm-hmm. And the best way I have found to treat them is hand pick them. It's super gross. And stomp them. End of story. So one thing about tomato hornworms is they usually each year come out with 2 generations of them. So you'll have one generation, and what you're actually hunting down is the larva, and then if you don't get it, it goes into the ground, and then it does the same process again. So there is that aspect of it. Being that it eats leaves, I don't know this for a fact. I will find out. I would say BT would probably treat it just Bacillus thuringiensis, which is organic. I think it will actually kill them, but I'm going to look that up real quick to make sure.
Yeah, the thing about the hand picking them, which is, there's a theme here clearly, is they're pretty sticky. Like a part of, again, their makeup. You got to
grab that billy goat hard.
Yeah. And so I was chatting with someone and like, again, mammals are the thing that I really don't, get down with. But I can manage most bugs, and I generally prefer not to manage any insects, but I can manage most insects as well. There's a short on Be Better Garden where I am with a pair of garden gloves or, regular, utility gloves. I'm picking it off and you could see it fighting like, nope, not going. So yeah, that's the bit. But again, that it's going to be one you're picking, then the second and the third and the fourth. What's interesting, I've moved my tomatoes around these last couple of years. Go ahead. Somebody get that yellow bell. And wherever I move them is where the hornworm goes. So there is that bit too. This is one of those things, once you change your space into this type of garden environment, you are inviting this level of nature, right?
You're creating an ecosystem, a micro ecosystem. Now, I will say here, I found insecticidal soap, so that will help kill them. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to get into this, this is where we start talking about the planter app a little bit, because it does have the companion planting and the combative planting. They are a sponsor of the show. Check the link below and get yourself a discount on the app. Test it out. If you like it, use the link. Get yourself, I think, what was it, like 20% discount?
I think it's 25 like plus, like somewhere around 25, 26%.
Yeah, it's a really good discount. Mm-hmm. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is because each plant in there, it has the companions and the combatives. It shows you by the dot that when you drag and drop in the square foot interface, but it tells you what the pests are for each one too. And so the reason why I bring that up is because as I look at this, I see this line here. It says lure them away with basil, marigolds, or dill. So, I don't know if that works, but see, that's the benefit of having everything in one space. So you can see that. I will say that you're probably going to need a fair amount of these plants in order to lure them away. But most people grow them and you're like, hey, I don't ever see the difference. Well, it's because you don't have enough planted. But another thing was when you look at the tomato hornworm, and as gross as it is, and let's say it's decimated your whole plant, but you see those white sacks hanging off the back of it, do not kill that tomato hornworm, because that is a parasitic wasp that will hatch out and attack and lay their eggs on the other ones and kill them. So whatever you do, please, for the love of God, don't kill that specific one. If there's any that don't have them on there, go ahead, take care of them.
For the record,
yeah, once
it has the eggs, that's the worst it looks. Well, yeah. No. Actually, no. Once it starts to eat itself from the inside out, it's a pretty freaky looking thing too.
But then the other thing you can do, and this is, we've not done an episode about no-till, and I don't know where I stand on it to this day. But one of the big things you can do is a light tilling of your soil at the beginning of the year. And you'll disturb the eggs. And it says here, I don't know if it's true, but it'll kill 90% of the hornworm larvae. Now, let's say it's May. You've listened to this and you're like, well, thanks for telling me now. I just planted. Well, yeah, you just planted, but you can still go out and scratch around with a hoe, do a light cultivation around the plant, especially before they get too big, and start disturbing some of these eggs and stuff like that. So, there is a little bit of that you can do too, but they're really, in my opinion, they're easy. You just got to be on top of them. You've got to know that they're coming, and I know it's gross, but you got to just be brave, throw a glove on if you have to. It's not going to bite you. I swear I thought I was going to bite my finger off the first time I grabbed one. But I just put it on the edge of my bed and I step on it. And just be aware that when you step, it squirts. So there is that. Yeah, it's pretty gross. It's fantastically gross, actually.
So if you have access to your garden daily, then absolutely manageable. If you are in maybe a community garden space where maybe you don't get to your garden every day, it's, and also considering that atmosphere, there's so many pros, but you're also subject to what people are growing around you. I've never had a plot in a community garden. There's some things I can imagine. There's some things that I probably would never even think about that occur kind of in that space. But I'm sure pests, are one of the impacts, kind of one of the cons associated with sharing your space with someone or many someones. So I'm sorry, I didn't finish my thought. So this is where you really have to be Johnny on the spot. If you're planting tomatoes, and for the first time last year, I saw them on peppers.
Interesting. Well, it's a nightshade family. So
let me say this. Garden memories are always foggy. It may have been I saw what looked like the damage of a hornworm.
Oh, okay.
On a pepper plant. So I may not have actually picked a hornworm from a pepper plant. So I'm like 95% sure it was just the damage, 5% sure that I may have handpicked them. So take that for what it's worth.
Now, I don't want to go through this episode without talking about flea beetles. Have you gotten those before?
No.
I get them every year. Eggplants and okra. Those are the targets. Now, I've gone out there, seen a flea beetle, and I didn't know what it was. This was a couple years ago. Well, more than a couple. I don't like to admit how long ago it was because that ages me. But I saw them, and I was like, what is that? And then I came back like a week later, and the plant 100% covered in flea beetles. It was an okra plant. So I came out, they're small, black, hard shell, don't look like much. What they do is they suck the sap out of the juices out of the plant. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. I thought about it for a minute, and I hit it with some neem oil. Wouldn't you know, that okra grew to be 10 feet tall. It grew from the 1 foot that it was at that moment to 10 feet tall through that season because I treated it. Would have been a lot faster and probably taller if I would have treated it sooner, but I didn't know, and I didn't know how fast it would explode.
Yeah.
But and they like to hang out. Like I found them in one of my eggplants. I think it was 2 years ago. They were congregated on a leaf, and I did the same thing. I removed a leaf, took care of it, whatever. Came back, and you just see them kind of scurry about through the plant. It's just an easy one to miss. And so just keep an eye out for it. And I don't want to portray the, the vision of everybody just go out there and just nuke every bug you see. They're all terrible. But you know what we're talking about. So know when you've got a bad bug. Well, know when you see damage.
So good bugs generally don't leave problems behind. I think it was last year or the year before, I saw June bugs on sunflowers in the front yard, the leaves. And so by this time, the sunflower is probably 12 feet tall. I could just see the shadow on the leaf. And I'm like, am I disturbing some, good creature that's just chilling up there, catching some shade or not? So I took a bamboo stick and kind of just shook the plant and it fell down. And then later on, that day, that week, that month, undercover, I saw a bunch of June beetles. Now, when I first saw the June beetle, I didn't know good, bad, friend or foe. Took a picture, a good quality picture, and did an image search and found that it was a June beetle. There was no question about it. Then read about it, right? So for me, and it's just, sometimes I do go to the internet and the community to say, hey, what do y'all think about this? But kind of go back to that idea of I don't want to panic. I don't want to sift through not informed information to get to the informed information. So just, again, you have so much power within your hands. If you're listening to this, chances are you have some type of smartphone and it can really be smart. So I encourage you, whether it's the June beetle or anything else, try to figure out what that bug is. If the bug is there, you have a really good chance. If you are just looking at damage, that's much harder, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the community may be one of your best resources.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing, too, is I've never had to deal with a June bug. The only way they fly in my mouth when I'm riding my skateboard at night in the summertime. That's the only problem I've ever had. Now, we're running short on time, and I think we're going to have to go a little bit long because we've got to talk about squash bugs, and we've got to talk about squash vine borers.
Yeah.
So squash bugs... and if you're listening now, I'm going to give you my remedy for squash vine borer, how I successfully conquered it last year. Squash bugs, they're a pain in the ass. And let me tell you, they are not ladybugs. Don't confuse yourself. So, there's multiple kinds of bugs. Squash is a very bad plant. Right?
It's very susceptible.
Yeah, susceptible. So there's all kinds so the squash bug, which is actually a lot like the wheel bug that's on my potatoes now, which is making me a little worried for my squash. You've got to constantly be treating them. Now, the benefit behind this is I'm going to combine both of them. The squash vine borer, you have to constantly treat it when it's hatching in your area. Mm-hmm. So it's going to hatch in your area at a specific time frame, and you need to look it up. Pull out your little phone, get your little fingers on there, and start looking up when that's going to hatch, because that's going to tell you how to treat. And this is the only thing that I proactively treat for, but I combine it with the squash bug as well, because inevitably what happens is the squash vine borer will demise your plant no matter what. It will get your plant. It's going to happen. The key is planting it early enough, feeding it enough, and treating it enough to get your harvest off of it beforehand. So if you go out there and your plant's just wilting in the middle of the day, you've got a squash vine borer. End of story. If you go out there and you've got dried up leaves on your squash, you've got squash bugs. And that's how it works. And then there's also what's the orange ladybug beetle that attacks them? I think it's the Asian beetle.
Or is it there's the Colorado potato beetle. I don't know about it attacking squash, but it has an orange hood.
No, see, I'm out of practice because I did not do it. It's not the season. I'm not dealing with it right now. But there's an orange beetle too. Looks like a ladybug, but it's orange in color. It is not a ladybug. Same thing. If you see like little edges of your leaves that look like dried up, curled, and they have holes in them, that's that beetle as well. So luckily, what I do is I treat for the beetles with neem oil, but I also make a concoction where I put the BT in with the neem oil, and that will also treat for the what's it called?
The eggs?
No, not the eggs. The squash vine borer, or as I like to call him, the little bastard. So I sprayed every 7 to 10 days last year with at minimum a BT treatment, and I did not have squash vine borer problems until after I got my harvest. So I called it my dirtiest crop. Even though it's organic, it's not technically dirty, but still I'm spraying it, whatever. But I was consistently every 7 to 10 days spraying my squash, and I had beautiful squash last year, hoping for the same this year. Everything worked out great. And then the squash bugs as well. Once you start seeing them, you've got to treat them fast. Look for the eggs underneath the leaf. They'll have, they'll look like little copper balls in a pattern. A lot of people take duct tape and put on them and like rip them off. I just treat. I don't want to put duct tape on my leaf. I don't want to damage the leaf. I just want to, I'll just treat, be done with it.
So I want to take this moment because you described a thing, and I feel like you've encapsulated one of the reasons why I am always slow to treat. So you said every 7 to 10 days, right? You just kept on going at it. And, I love the idea. It's such a cool phrase, like it's the dirtiest plant in your garden. And putting squash plants aside, that's what I don't want to introduce into my garden if I can help it. Right? The idea of I have dirty plants.
Yeah.
Right? And so there is a lot of sacrifice you make. Like I rarely have squash for my garden, right?
Yeah.
And I'm basically willing to sacrifice it. The collard green plants are beautiful, but I rarely get to see them because I have them covered, something draped over them all year. But that's what I'm willing to sacrifice. And so it's me trading one bit of work for another, to be quite frank, because everything else that I'm doing, handpicking all of this stuff, is a bunch of work where there's obviously a regimen that you followed that produced a great harvest for you last year. And there's no wrong or right. This is just where I am in my garden life.
Yeah.
So I want you all to kind of copy that, paste it, put it in the back of your head. When I speak about pests and treatments and things of that nature, this is not me judging Ben, the youngest Ben, or anyone else that takes a different path than I do. But that's just my mindset around it. If I can control a thing in my garden, because I'm eating dirty food everywhere else.
Yeah.
I want to, when I can. But I'm not above getting some nasty and spraying it if I feel like I need to.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, and you don't really have to answer it. It's a rhetorical question, but you don't grow in your garden, let's say, because it's the dirtiest crop in your garden. And again, I want to state the fact that I'm using an organic treatment and I'm calling it dirty. But you're willing to go to the store and buy it. We know what it takes. Now, I've told you what I've figured out it takes in order to do it. They're not using, unless you're buying organic squash, which I don't even know if they sell such a thing, really. What does that mean for that crop? Because we know how hard it is to grow squash and fight these pests. So that means that is a dirty crop.
Yeah, it's an excellent segue into a whole series of episodes around this. One, I don't buy squash from the grocery store, but I'm just using squash as an example. I'm just trying to articulate kind of my thought. Like, it's almost a gateway in my mind, right? So I'm holding down the fighting the good fight if I can avoid doing these things for as long as I can, I am now consuming kind of one meal out of X number I can consider clean. I'm putting air quotes around clean. I mean, plainly put, if I can avoid spraying a thing, then why not take this opportunity to avoid spraying a thing? Right. You know, and so with that in mind, there's some crops where if I had decimation in my collards, let me tell you something, you know, but there's also the bit around, and you said we're going to go long, so here we are.
A little bit long.
Eating leaves and treating leaves, I look at, in my mind, in my space, differently than eating the fruit of a plant. Right. You know, so I know scientifically the thing that's being absorbed is the thing that's being absorbed, you know, but I am more inclined to treat something that I'm spraying the plant and I'm going to consume the actual fruit of it versus spraying it and I'm going to consume the leaves of it. Right. So that's, again, you got a lot of things that advertise you can consume it within 24 hours of an application and all of that. Like, why do it if I don't need to? And a lot of times in my garden, there are things that are being produced where I don't need to. And if there's some things that suffer for it, they suffer for it.
Yeah, it's, I'm trying to find, I have one treatment that is like my nuclear bomb that I use. I only used it once last year. And I used it because I had the cucumber worm.
All right, I'm going to give you another second to find it because I'll also say, I say all of that fully recognizing that some of my methods are perpetuating the pest for future years as well. So there's that bit of it too. You know, so technically I'm not killing any larva with any of my methods, right? You know?
Yeah.
So there is definitely a, you know, potentially you could maybe describe a greater chance that it returns the following year.
Why would you do that though? Why would you let it perpetuate? Like, what's the thought? I want to know what your thought process is and why you would let that, knowing that you're going to make it worse in the future years. Why would you let that kind of carry on?
I described it as knowing that I could be. Listen, these plants.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, and okay.
Okay,
so,
I'm not attacking.
Yeah, I know you're not.
Okay.
And I don't feel like I need to or should have to defend. Right. And I know that you're not asking me to. From my perspective, the goal is to eat the cleanest thing you can. From my perspective, because I don't know, not even probably 50% comes from my garden as far as what I eat. Right. I don't know how much kind of spray, the bad spray that goes into every other food that I eat, every other thing that I consume. Right. And I'm assuming that there's probably some things that I wouldn't be crazy about because I don't buy all organic everything. Right. And so I look at this as this is my little corner of the world in my garden space where I can control the thing. And if I can control this thing, I get to dictate how much or how little or if any at all. Right. And I'm taking the risk that even with my methods, I am not doing permanent damage. So you think about year over year, there are things like the biggest crop failure that I've had would be the 2022 tomatoes, right? And we know that was more of the hand of the gardener. You know, maybe if I would have had some regimens where I was treating it, maybe not. I'm just basically waiting for it to catch me. And because it hasn't caught me, it makes me think that I'm not doing, you know, irreparable, you know the word I'm trying to say, damage.
Yeah, bad damage. So the one that I use, that's like, I got a problem. I got to take care of everything. I don't care what it happens. This is like, I'm saving my crop. End of story. I know the risks to it. It's a pyrethrin concentrate. I just put on the list. I tested it out last year and I liked it. Only used it like twice. I was able to save from the cucumber worm. It's the oil from the chrysanthemum from a mum. And it is a blanket killer, though. But it's organic, but it is a blanket killer. Now, I have beehives, and it didn't kill my bees. So there is that aspect of it. I didn't spray my bees, don't get me wrong. But I was, I sprayed it in the evening. And, okay. We have to understand, when you're treating for pests, you don't go out in the middle of the day and treat. You either do it early in the morning. I like to do it in the evening when the sun's going down because the pests are coming home and the leaves are dry. So there's when you treat. But I use that, and that's like, boom, it'll take care of it. But I want you guys to remember, please, 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 you cannot just treat one time and walk away. You've got to treat for the life cycle of the animal, which is typically 7 to 10 days. So within every 7 to 10 days, I usually do 3 treatments, and you kill the initial ones, then the eggs hatch, you'll have some scragglers, you kill them. The third treatment should just be kind of wiping out the rest of them. So it's a 3-step process. Please don't come on to the Backyard Gardens Community Garden Facebook group and be like, I sprayed with neem oil one time and they're still there. You've got to do it multiple times. That's how it works. You've got to clean house. So the pyrethrin oil works really well. Just know that it is a broad spectrum, basically. It will kill the good ones as well. So a lot of these are like neem oil. It doesn't, and BT doesn't affect every single insect. So not all of your beneficial insects will be killed. So just keep that in mind as you're going through it. Don't demonize them when they don't need to be, is I guess where I'm going. So
okay.
That's what I got for pests. We do need to do the question of the day. And before we do that, I do want to just say, please, I forgot to say in the planter portion of it, it's the planter app. It's a discount below, and you can use it on your tablet, your phone, your computer, which I love using it on my PC. It's so much easier, but you can use it anytime. And it's available in the Google and Apple store. That's the PLANTER app. Now, we have a question. And our question, actually, we have our first question question. So if you want to, thank you for using it. If you want to use the email question, it's bygquestion@gmail.com specifically for this. And we're hoping that this will take prevalence, but Facebook is also, our Facebook group is another good place to put a question. But this one is perfect for this. It's about root knot nematodes. So Laura asks,
Hey, Laura.
you can look at me like I'm dumb.
I looked at you like, are you glitching?
She says, my 2 vegetable beds have root knot nematodes. Today, I sowed Nema Gone marigold seeds for a cover crop for the summer. What else can I do to kill them out? Also, how can I prevent a reinfestation of them in the future? She's a new listener in Oklahoma. Well, thank you, Laura, for reaching out. And root knot nematodes are one of those that are scary because you can't really see them.
Yeah, I have. This is all you, brother.
You don't know anything about root knot nematodes?
I don't know anything, and you see how I'm all squinched up.
So first of all, I think what you've done with doing a cover crop specifically for, I don't know if marigolds will do it. I don't know that for a fact, but what I do know, based on a study I read, to get the true benefits of marigolds, you need to have a large portion of them. So in order to do that, it sounds like you're moving in the right direction because you have a large portion of them. So root knot nematodes, I had them one year. So first of all, you can solarize your soil. So what that means is you get something like a tarp, a black tarp specifically. You put it on in the summertime and you just heat that soil, like really heat it. Tilling it at the same time to mix them all up will help. You can get beneficial nematodes to put in. Somebody asked me about beneficial nematodes the other day. I don't know how I feel about them, but I know that I had what I think was root knot nematodes. I used beneficial nematodes and it was kind of a process, but it seemed to work. So it should do all right. You can do that, but I think tilling that soil, mixing them up, getting them up to the top will help. There is also a treatment for them. It's called, what is it called? I have it here. It's kind of expensive. Oh, it's expensive because this is a big bottle of it. A Monterey Nematode Control. So it's a quart. It's kind of expensive, like I said. It looks to be, yep, it is organic. This is an organic company, which I don't know why organic labels are so bad.
What do you mean bad?
Like, they just don't look good. No. They look like something you would like they look like they're stuck in the 80s. I can't zoom in to see what's in it, but you can try that and just follow the directions on the bottle, for that's what I would do. And the only reason why I'm suggesting something that I haven't done is because if I was in your position, I would kind of reach out and do a little bit different. But yeah, this is it's called the Monterey Nematode Control. So between all of those treatments, you should get on par with that. And then if you wanted to plant, you could look for some plants that are not susceptible to the root knot nematode. I don't know off the top of my head if there are any to it. What I do know is vinegar will kill them, but it'll also kill everything else and can make your soil acidic. So you want to be really careful when you fight a certain pest like the root knot nematode that you don't actually do more damage in the future. Mm-hmm. So you want to be very careful of that. And I'm seeing something here. Yeah, it looks like hydrogen peroxide, which is a favorite of mine to use in the garden, will actually work too. So it's one of those things where, because it lives in the soil, I would till, and then I would make a hydrogen peroxide mixture and then spray it, and then you would start to kill them. But I would stay on top of that and just look for in your area when they're prevalent to hatch and do stuff like that. And then you should be able to get back in the right direction. Those are the steps that I would take in my garden if I had that issue. Does that help?
I hope so.
Well, does that help you if you're having root knot nematodes?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
There you go. So the best thing to do is heat, though. End of story. So thank you, Laura, for reaching out. If you'd like to leave us a question, we would hope that you would do it on bygquestion@gmail.com or join the Facebook group and just label whatever you want question of the day. I also started doing posts where we're asking for questions because it is easy to keep track of that way. So please reach out. We love answering your questions, and it makes us think, just like this question. It made me consider, what would I do in my garden if I was in her shoes? So I'm sorry you have to deal with that, though. It's not something fun to deal with. And on that note, buy some seeds from us if you would. Help support the show. You'll get you some seeds. Use the code good until the first day of summer for 1 million. We're going to try and get some fall-specific seeds in the store before that date comes. We're going to try our hardest to get them in there. I can't guarantee it, but we're going to do the best we can. Link is below for that. The code 1 million can be spelled anyway, no spaces or use numbers. Get you 10% off your order and a free packet of seeds. So do that. Become a subscriber if you'd like. That's a great way to help us out. And also check out the Amazon list. There is a specific place for pest control that we use, and I will add that pyrethrin oil when I can find it at a decent price in there. So check that out. And otherwise, everybody, do me a favor, do us a favor, continue to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at patreon.com/backyardgardens, or you can be an Apple subscriber, and in both of those, you'll get an extra episode every month. You can also make a one-time PayPal donation with the link below, and you can get all kinds of gardening gear like t-shirts and mugs and cups from the link below at Teespring, and we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.